Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Matt, and today I'm going to be reviewing Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Ware. And since this is a book about necromancers, I am joined by my friend here, Mr. Skull. My best friend, my roommate, and I found this when we were at her cottage a little while ago, and so we are taking it home. So we took it home, and we are going to get it cleaned up for display. Bone people, tell me, is this a coyote, is this a fox, or is this someone's family dog? Because I'm thinking it might be the latter. Anyway, he's going to be joining us for today's video since we are talking about necromancers. So, Harrow the Ninth is a book that I thought was going to be 5-star. I thought it was going to be my 6th 5-star book in a row after finishing The Demon in White by Christopher Ruocchio. Review for that will be incoming. It was an amazing book, and you need to pick up the Sun Eater series if you haven't already. But yeah, so I thought Harrow the Ninth was going to be the 6th book in a row that was 5 stars. And it didn't make 5 stars. It didn't make 4 stars. I don't even know if it made 3 stars. This book ended up being a massive, massive disappointment. And I had a bit of a hard time articulating why that was until I was scrolling through Goodreads and I found a review by Goodreads user Eric Allen. And his review is quite long, but one of the first things he said really kind of struck the nail on the head, and that is that Harrow the Ninth just really feels and reads like it's just awful, awful fanfiction. Harrow the Ninth was his #1 most anticipated book of the entire year. He was pumped for this book in 2020. He doesn't even think Rhythm of War was going to top Harrow the Ninth, and yet he only gave the book 2 stars because he said it reads like really awful fanfiction, and I have to agree with him, quite frankly. So there are a lot of negative points, so let's just jump right into it. Basically, my biggest issue with this book is that literally nothing happens. Like, nothing happens for the first 2/3, for the first 70% of the book. It's honestly ridiculous. I knew going into it, because I remembered from Gideon, that the books don't actually have that much action in them until kind of later on. But in this book, literally for the first 70% of it, we are getting nothing but characters on a space station just having conversations with each other. Like, there's nothing more interesting than that going on. So for the first 300 pages out of a 430-page book, we are basically just getting characters talking to one another on the space station while we're served this mystery, if you can even call it that. Basically, there's this whole mystery going on throughout the book, but what's so incredibly frustrating and infuriating about it is Harrow is seeing the body. It seems like she's hallucinating someone, something, and we don't really know where it's coming from, who it is, anything like that. And that could very well be a super interesting concept, a really cool premise for the book. But it's not even a mystery, it's just something we're told about, and then it keeps showing up over and over throughout the first 300 pages of the book. But we are not given a single clue. We are not given any kind of scraps or any information whatsoever about this. And so it's basically the author just keeps popping in and it's hey, look at this mystery, it's so mysterious. Isn't it so intriguing and mysterious? Look, it's a mystery. Just over and over and over again without really actually delivering anything that's tangible for the reader to possibly decipher what it is. And so you're basically just told about this thing over and over again while learning absolutely nothing about it, and it just was really, really annoying. And then another negative point, they're pretty much all negative, is the character of Harrow herself. Now, Harrow in book 1 was a interesting character. Gideon was a super hilarious protagonist to read from, and Harrow had some very good banter with Gideon, and she was snarky, sarcastic, and rude, and kind of full of herself in book 1. But in this book, Harrow just feels completely castrated. She it feels almost like the author Tamsin Muir just kind of lost who Harrow was as a person, and instead replaced her with this super boring cardboard cutout who was just super meek and boring to the extreme. And while that could have worked in a sense, because one of kind of what Harrow has done to herself, what Harrow's become, and what happened at the end of book one, that it might make sense in another book for a character to be diminished after these kind of experiences. But in this book it didn't read like that. It literally just felt like bad writing. Like, if Tamsin Muir wanted to make that a thing, she could have put that into the characterization that all of these things were affecting Harrow, but that's not present whatsoever. It's just Harrow is a completely different and way more boring person who happens to share the same name. And so that ended up being very infuriating as well. I really didn't like Harrow in this book whatsoever. It's not even that she drove me crazy, it's that she was just such a non-entity in the story. She didn't feel very active in any sense. I feel like she was just almost a passive observer in her own little bubble, while all of these admittedly also boring conversations happened around her on this police station. So that was really lame. And then probably the thing that annoyed me the most in Harrow the Ninth was the humor. Now, the humor in book one, it was good, like it was actually pretty funny, but that's because Gideon herself as a character was really hilarious to read from. In this book, however, Harrow, like I said, is completely diminished. She's boring as hell, and so we're not getting Harrow's voice telling us the story in a funny way or anything. In fact, we're not even getting Harrow's voice at all, because like half this book is told in second person perspective as a stupid little gimmick. And it's not like N.K. Jemisin, she does second person and she does it fantastically in Broken Earth, and that's not really even a gimmick. That makes sense when you get to the end of the series. This one, it literally just felt like a gimmick, and like there's no real other purpose to it. Even at the end, when you figure out why, it just feels gimmicky. But anyway, so you would think that, like, okay, if Harrow was a funny character, then getting the story told through her kind of voice, that would make the story funny as well. But instead, we're just getting the author's own voice telling us funny things about a super, super boring character. And so instead of it feeling like the actual, like, very lively, cool, hilarious character, it more feels like the author is just coming in, chiming in all the time throughout the book, being like, look how funny this is. Like, I am hilarious. I am the funniest person in the world. How can I be this goddamn funny? I'm hilarious. Like, it basically just felt like Muir was doing that the entire book. And it drove me crazy, as well as did pretty much everything in this book. I will say one joke that actually did really actually get me, though, at the end of the book, was there's this character whose name is Wake, and the Emperor is talking to her, and she was like, hey, say my full name, and then he says her full name, which is like this long ass title, and then a little bit later on, he introduces her to two other people, you know, like, you and you, please let me introduce you to Commander Wake Me Up Inside. Sorry if I got that wrong. And that joke got me, I do have to say. An Evanescence reference, that's golden. I love that. But then we get to the end of the book, and the end of the book was also bad, but bad in a different way. I don't know, it was like almost good, because that's where he finally gets some actions and he gets some goddamn answers about what's going on, but it was still bad at the same time. So let me try and explain a little bit. So the end of the book is where things finally start picking up. It finally gets interesting, thank God. That was actually really nice. But it was also at the same time a complete and total shit show, because the way all of these kind of revelations are handled, all this new information is delivered to us, is it's like bombshell revelation after bombshell revelation after bombshell revelation. and having them all just one right after another without getting any kind of clue or foreshadowing at any point early on in the book just felt, again, very frustrating. And just having them one after another completely deadened their emotional impact after like the first one or two things. And so while we do finally get some answers, it was also very confusing still at the same time, because we're told all of these things that just honestly still don't even make any sense. Like, considering the types of fantasy I read, I do kind of consider myself a smart guy, even though I'm very, very stupid at the same time. I just know things, I'm not actually smart. But I will say for myself that having read like 100 to 120 books a year, I do know how to read a goddamn story. And so you would think that I would understand Harrow the Ninth. But even at the end, when we're just getting all of these revelations one after another, they're just like blurted out at us. And we don't get much explanation surrounding that. We just get, here's a revelation, but we don't get any kind of like more backstory to it for the most part. It's just a whole bunch of just like weird, scattered, random info that we're being thrown. And it honestly just really felt stupid. Like, the whole thing felt stupid. But at the same time, the end was a little bit good, because that's where things actually kind of started getting interesting. We got some actual action with the revenant beasts. We got the invader into kind of Harrow's body, that whole thing. And then we got the stuff with the Emperor. You know from the beginning of the book that the Emperor dies at some point. And so all of the Emperor stuff that happens in the final last chunk of the book, that was actually interesting, and we did kind of get some information there. But even the stuff with like Wake and Hytherea and all of that, when that was being told to us, it still didn't make much sense, and I still, honestly, to this day, don't even know what really happened. And then finally, at the very, very end of the book, like the very end, there's this whole kind of action scene where this, I don't know, spoilers, I guess, but this like huge old mouth just kind of opens up. And that whole thing was just so random, and also didn't make any sense in any sort of way either. And so the whole book was just very frustrating from beginning to end. And then especially the final chapter, like the epilogue. What was that epilogue? Like, I truly have no idea what that epilogue meant. If any of you have read the book and know what the epilogue means, or if any of you just want to explain the book to me, because it's like apparently going over my head or something. If you have answers that could help me out, then maybe type them down below in the comments. Maybe that'll kind of change the way I feel about the book. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. I thought it was going to be a 5-star book. It's more of like the 2.5 star book. I am super duper disappointed in it, and it broke my 5-star reading streak, which is annoying. But to salvage that, I am about like 85-90% done with Doors of Eden by Adrian Tchaikovsky. He, in the last 2 years, wrote Children of Time and Children of Ruin, which respectively are about sentient, like, human intelligent level spiders and octopus. And so those are some very, very, very interesting books. And this new book, Doors of Eden, kind of tackles very similar themes, but it takes place in kind of our present day world. And while it is a little bit weird in some senses, and it's not as good as those last two books, it is still a very solid book. It's like 4.5, maybe 5 stars. So thankfully, that just kind of salvaged my reading. But yeah, Harrow, it was a huge disappointment. I am, of course, going to read the final book in the trilogy, but I honestly don't really have high hopes, unfortunately, which really sucks. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. Please be sure to like the video and comment down below. Both of those things, like any kind of engagement, really helps out the channel, and I do want to grow the channel so that, imagine if I had like 100,000 subscribers, one, I can make some money, and two, if even like 1% or a 0.5% of my viewers picked up a book based on my recommendation, that would make me so incredibly happy, getting some people to read books that are underrated and that nobody else in BookTube talks about, like Lies of Descent. If you want to pick up an underrated book, pick up Lies of Descent by Troy Carroll Butcher, I believe. That book I read around the same time as Rage of Dragons, and while Rage of Dragons is a good book on the whole, I don't think it's anywhere near as amazing as everyone on BookTube seems to think. And I read this book, Lies of Descent, either right before or right after, and it blew Rage of Dragons out of the water, but I have never heard a single soul talk about it. And so if you do want to pick up an underrated book based on my recommendations, please pick up Lies of Descent, and I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, now I'm done for real, so that's all I have for you guys today. Have a good one. Bye.